Okay, this is the last section of 2.1. We're going to solve by completing the square, and then this example leads into what we're getting ready to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move the 5 over. So we wind up and move over here. X squared minus 4x equals -5. I have to add something here, and I'll put something here. So b is -4. We're going to take -4 divided by 2. We're going to get a -2. And when we square the -2, we get a +4. So we're going to add 4 here, and we'll add 4 here. So we know this is something squared. Gives me a number. Well, sorry, it's a plus. -4 plus -5 plus 4 is a -1. Over here we have an x, and this -2 has to go inside here. And now that we're in this square with equal to a number, we can take the square root of both sides. We take the square root of both sides, we get x minus 2, and this is I, so it's a plus or minus I. Okay, move the 2 over. You're going to put that in front of the plus or minus, so we get x equals 2 plus or minus I. Now, this is called imaginary solution because it has an I in it, so this is an imaginary solution. When you look at graphs that are like this that have the I in it, what it's telling you is that for something like this, it opens up because this is positive. Your x, or this is positive over here, it's going to open up. This graph will never cross the x-axis. So therefore, that's why it's an I. There's not going to get a ever intercept there. So that's what that means. So when we look at using the quadratic formula next, this idea over here about what's under the plus or minus and so forth was just more for the other part, but also to kind of combine with what we're going to do here. So what we need to do first is that we need to we have to have the thing in standard form, so that means this must be always equal to 0. Must equal 0. So now we're going to use the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus a 4 times an a times a c, all of it divided by a 2a. So when we look at how to solve these, again, we must be in the standard form where everything's moved to the other side, we're equal to 0. This is not happening here. So we're going to have to move the 2x and the 1. So that's going to go over here. So I'm going to wind up with x squared, and I'm going to write it in the form of ax plus bx plus c, x squared plus bx plus c. So I wind up with this. Okay. Now I'm not going to complete the square or anything on that. I'm just going to find it by using the formula. What is a? A is 1. B is this -2. And C is this -1. We're going to substitute that into our formula. If you do not know the formula, you have to have it memorized. Write it over and over every time you use it. So I'm going to do x equals negative, and then b is a -2. Please be careful. If you forget, you want to make sure that you understand that that's a -2 that's inside there. The negative on the outside does not, this negative on the outside is not the negative next to the b. It's on its own. It's minus a negative number here, okay? Plus or minus b squared. Again, please be careful. Like this, it's positive. If you wrote it this way, you put it in your calculator, if you get to use one, you'll get a -4. Well, it's not a -4. The negative is being squared, so please, caution, find yourself making sure that you're looking at that. -4 times a, which is 1, and c is -1. All over 2 times 1. Now, we're just going to combine our terms, do all the things we need to math-wise, and then get a solution. So here I have 2, this is 2 by the way, plus or minus, underneath I have 4, and this is negative 4 times a 1 times a negative 1, so that's a positive 4 underneath there, all over 2. So this is 2 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 2. Caution, caution, caution. These two do not cancel. You'll get an incorrect answer. They're not, you have to have, and I'll show you in a minute how that works out. Okay, so now what we want at this point is to simplify any radicals, anything that we can. So the square root of 8, I'll do it over here. Remember, it's the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. So the square root of 8 is 2 times the square root of 2. After a while, you might memorize them. So I have 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 2. That's the square root of 8 is all over 2. Now, if you see that you have something in common here, here, and here, then you can cancel. What I want to make sure you understand what you're doing. You're going to factor a 2 up at the top. Okay, so if I take 2 divided by 2, I get a 1. Oops, I'm going to highlight. Okay, so now if I look at this, this, and this, they're all the same. And if I just look at the GCF of those three, which is 2, I can divide everything by the 2, okay? I can take the GCF of all three of those. So I can reduce, so it will just wind up reduce all 3 by the GCF. I'll make sure I understand this 3, this 3, this 3. So 2 divided by 2 is a 1, plus or minus this 2 divided by 2 is also a 1. We don't put a 1 in front, so it's 1 times the square root of 2. And on the bottom, 2 divided by 2 is 1. And again, I'm just going to clean this up. We don't leave this here, and we don't divide by 1, we divide by 1, but divide by 1 is just what it is on top. So this is your answer. 2 solutions. Now, what I do in the next few lessons in here is it does take some space, so make sure that you have plenty of room, okay? So next we're going to do, again, use the quadratic formula. Try to write a little smaller. First, I have to move everything to the left. So I'm going to subtract a 10x. I'm going to put it under this one. I'm going to subtract the 1, and I'll put it under this one. So when I do that, I'm left with a 3x squared over here. Negative 2 minus 10 is a negative 12x. 5 minus 1 is a 4. And on the side, this cancels to zeros. Okay, so now you don't have to do any completing square. We're just going to say what A is. A is 3. B is negative 12. And C is 4. Use your quadratic formula. X equals plus, oops, sorry, not plus or minus. Stuck with the other things we've been doing. Okay, so it is a negative b. So negative, and then negative b actually is negative 12. So minus b, which is this, plus or minus, here we go. B is 12, negative 12, excuse me. We're going to square that. And then we're going to minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Okay, so now let's clean all this up by putting everything together. So underneath here, so here I have a 12 plus or minus 12 squared is 144. And then 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 4 is 48, and it's a minus 48. All over 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, so this is an x equals. Sorry, over here in our solution, make sure, remember, these are x equals. These are Okay, so now let's finish what's on there. So I have 12 plus or minus 144 minus 48 is a 96. All over 6. Okay, so now we're going to look at this 96 and kind of figure out how we can simplify that. Again, find the largest perfect square. And I know when I do the math and divide it out, I'm going to divide it by perfect squares. If I have a 6 here, I'm going to think of 4, 16, 36. 36 is too big. So this is actually can be simplified to square root of 16 times the square root of, I'll write that in different colors so you can see it. So square root of 96 is the square root of 16 times the square root of 6. Square root of 16 is 4, so I can change this now to 4 times square root of 6. So I have 12 plus or minus 4 times the square root of 6 all over 6. Look at those three numbers here, 12, 4, and 6. GCF for that is a 2. So now divide everything by 2. And you wind up with 12 divided by 2 is 6, plus or minus 4 divided by 2 is 2, times the square root of that. And then 6 divided by 2 is a 3. So that's what x equals. 2 solutions. That's a 6, not a b. All right, last one. So we have the negative 13 on this side, so we're going to move it over. So we're going to add 13 to both sides. So we wind up with x squared plus 6x plus 13 equals 0. A is 1, B is 6, C is 13. So now substitute into your formula. So we have x equals a negative, and then b is 6, plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and times c, which is 13, all over 2 times 1. So let's simplify into the radical. All right, 6 squared is 36. So that's a minus because it's all positive. 4 times 13 is a deck of cards, so that's 52. Times 2. So now let's just 36 times, 36 minus 52 is what, negative 16. So I have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 16 all over 2. So now I have an I in here because of that negative 1. So when I take the square root of this, I'm going to simplify that. I am going to get a negative 6 plus or minus 4i all over 2. Okay, now if I look at these three, I can see that I have a GCF there. So this GCF is 2. So divide all this by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. Plus or minus 4 divided by 2 is a 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm not putting it on there. So x equals these two imaginary roots.